Inside the Village.
Professor, can I ask you too, just specifically about the steel and aluminum industry? Our headquarters of Village Media is in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. Algoma Steel is right beside us. Obviously, steel factories in Hamilton are also concerned about the tariffs that have been put into place. Is it a fair question to ask where you see the steel industry in Canada in the next 6 months? I mean, what it seems they're facing, to me, it seems like almost an existential crisis here in Canada.
The word I was going to use was existential as well. So well chosen. The longer that the tariffs last, the harder it is to find a way forward, because remember that steel is not easily transported, right? If you're moving it into the US, there's still a very large transportation cost that adds to the actual steel process itself. But if you're now talking about putting it on ships and sending it to Europe, or putting it on ships and sending it to Asia, you now have to compete with, say, Korean steel builders who don't have to deal with the transportation cost, at least not the ocean component of it. And same thing then in Europe, that there's going to be steel producers in Europe who are going to say, we don't have to contend with the Atlantic Ocean. So Canada, unfortunately, if you take the US out of the story, is not landlocked, it's waterlocked. And in this case, it could actually work against us in the shipment of heavy manufactured goods. There's just not going to be a lot of markets that are interested in what we have to sell. Even if we could say we can do it 10%, 20% cheaper than competitors in Europe and Asia, by the time that you're done with the transportation cost, a lot of that goes away. And it doesn't make sense then why you would want to tie yourself to Canada. And so it's a little bit telling that we've seen Europe, Asia has not jumped to Canada's defense in the last 5 months. You would have thought that when the US starts their attack on Canada first, everybody would have jumped to our defense. We're friendly people. Everybody in the world likes us. We travel the world with Canadian flags and get picked off by people who want to talk to us because they love us. Except nobody came forward and said, we're here to jump to your defense, because they kind of recognize without the US, there's not really much that we can offer the world, at least in terms of goods. And steel is going to be one of those that gets hit really hard the longer that this lasts. And remember, there's no amount of Canadian business that can make up for the American business that we were doing.
No, for sure. I've heard the national security argument too, that the governments wouldn't allow our steel factories to fail because you have to be able to produce steel domestically. Would the government not allow would the government allow a major steel factory in Canada to close?
Well, I guess we go back then to the COVID story, right? Because remember that there were a lot of businesses then that were facing existential threats, especially in the early days pre-vaccine. We didn't know how long we were going to be locked down, and we were hoping that science would go fast enough that we could kind of find a way back to normalcy. What do we do if we say, look, maybe this industry was in terminal decline anyway? So steel, of course, is a major input in the auto industry in Canada. But if you take a look, the auto industry in Canada now is producing about 50% of what it was at its peak. So it's clearly trending down. And especially now with, say, EV, maybe the US market doesn't seem particularly interested in it. Canada can't do it alone. At what point do we just maybe call it and say, all right, we're not going to let it fail necessarily, but we're not also going to try and prop it up either. So if it fails on its own, the government stands ready to help all of those steel workers that lose their jobs, whether it's through EI, welfare support payments, retraining if they're young enough, but also sending a signal then to, say, community colleges that might be training our future steel workers, saying, hey, maybe you shouldn't be putting money into this part of the training process, because within a generation, we don't know necessarily that this is going to be the winning industry. You can still have a rump portion of it that's needed for Canadian national security issues. But the stuff that was maybe being used for the American export industry, at some point you have to be nasty sometimes and just say, I don't see a future here. And propping it up is merely lost money that is never going to be recouped. Again, if the democratic process says, but we're okay with that, cool, then you can shut me up. But if we're purely judging this on a business case justification, maybe this is one of those industries that it's unfortunate the tariffs came, but maybe it's disruptive to a process that was already showing signs of strain.